Very good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the class. So, we have completed yesterday the part A of your syllabus, which is macroeconomics. Now, in this class, we are going to cover part B, which is Indian economic development. There are 8 chapters. We'll try to cover them today itself because tomorrow is your examination, right? So, Indian economic development. This unit, this entire book basically talks about how Indian economy has evolved right from 1947. Even before that, what was the structure, what impact did colonialism had on Indian economy. So recent developments, contribution of planning commission, works, reforms like LPG, human capital, human development, all these would be discussed. So Indian economic development. Chapter 1 we are going to discuss as of now. Chapter 1 is Indian economy on the eve of independence. When we got independence, what was the state of Indian economy? So key points, what you should remember, that we were largely influenced by British colonial rule, of course. So we were heavily influenced by British colonialism. And the major impact on India was that British rule exploited India as a supplier of raw material and made a market for British finished goods. So India by Britishers was made as a mere supplier of raw material. We just used to supply raw materials. Everything got produced in the British industry, so it generated employment over there, and then everything got sold in Indian market. So India only served as a consumer market, right? So nothing was produced here. So since production was happening in Britain, so of course economic activities and income generation would be happening in Britain. So our industry was collapsed, but before that we were actually performing well, right? But British colonial rule made a supplier of raw material, and they dumped their produce in Indian market because we were a big market. That's why. Under economic scenario, under colonial rule, you see there was low level of economic development. Pre-British India was very flourishing, right? We were very flourishing before colonialism. But then British policies, they destroyed our local industries, cottage industries, सबको खत्म कर दिया due to heavy industrialization, and India became heavily dependent on the imported goods. If you look at the economic growth rate under British rule, it was less than 2% per year, less than 2% per year. Also, per capita output growth was just 0.5% per year. Per capita output growth was just 0.5% per year. And if we talk about agricultural sector on the eve of independence, what was the state? So 85% almost of the population was dependent on agriculture. Now, Britishers did what? They introduced land revenue system like zamindari, which led to stagnation and low productivity. What was zamindari? In which you had zamindars. They used to collect excessive taxes from the farmers, and they used to manipulate the figures. They sometimes did not record the repayment of loans. They used to exploit the farmers, right? So zamindari system destroyed Indian agriculture. Also, lack of technological improvement destroyed Indian agriculture. Then focus on cash crops, because cash crops are commercial crops. ऐसी क्रॉप्स जिनसे ट्रेड किया जा सके, जिससे ब्रिटिशर्स could earn hefty money, they were grown, right? And these cash crops at huge level, plantation level, so plantation agriculture was practiced. They destroyed the quality of Indian soils. Also, since these were cash crops, they were not food crops. So India did not become self-sufficient in food grains. We were still importing the food grains. Cash crops like banana, cotton, sugar, coffee, indigo, they were grown, right? Then if we talk about the industrial sector here, so British policies aimed at deindustrialization of local industries. हमारी local industries को they collapsed it, they destroyed it completely. They reduced India to only raw material supplier and a consumer of whatever has been produced in British market. Handicraft industries, they declined, and lot of jobs were snatched out. Then cotton and jute mills were set up. You see cotton growing cotton and jute mills, because these are plantation crops, cash crops. They earn huge money by selling them in the global market. So cotton and jute crops, they were set up in Maharashtra, Gujarat and Bengal. Jute primarily was set up in Bengal because the jute production happens in the area. So cotton and jute mills, remember, were set up in Maharashtra, Gujarat and Bengal. Then industries mein TISCO was set up in 1907. So this is important. The Tata Iron and Steel Company, TISCO, was set up in 1907. This was a good development. But what we were lacking was lack of capital goods, because we did not produce, right? We were only supplier of raw materials. So we had lesser availability of capital goods. What are capital goods? Which can be used in production, like machinery, equipment, tools. Then foreign trade, if you see, foreign trade, what was the status of foreign trade? On the eve of India's independence, so India became an exporter of raw material and importer of finished products. So the trade status was, we were exporter of raw material and we were importer of final goods. So we were just consumers, we were not producing, right? This was very devastating, and trade was monopolized by Britain, because more than 50% of the exports and imports, they were controlled by Britain. But then opening of the Suez Canal 1869, it increased British control over India. What is Suez Canal? Suez Canal basically connects your Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, right? तो Red Sea और Mediterranean Sea को connect करती है Suez Canal, Mediterranean Sea एंड रेड सी को कनेक्ट करती है स्वेज कैनाल, राइट? ये शॉर्ट रूट था. अब इसके होने से क्या हुआ, हमारा एक्सेस, द ट्रेड विद द यूरोपियन कंट्रीज आल्सो इम्प्रूव्ड, बट देन इट वाज अगेन डोमिनेटेड बाय द Britishers. Then if we talk about demographic conditions, what were the demographic conditions at that time? So remember, first census was conducted in 1881 and it showed low population growth. There was low population growth, but high birth rate and high death rate. Death rates were also high because the healthcare system was not apt, and birth rate was also high because of illiteracy and all, lack of awareness regarding family planning. Life expectancy was only 32 years because of poor medical system, right? See, India has a legacy of very rich traditional medicines and systems. We have Charak Samhita, which also talks about very complex surgeries, right? So it was not that India did not have this thing, but the thing was, Britishers, they destroyed everything, right? When India was a colony, so the healthcare was not proper. That's why high rates, birth rates and death rates were there. Food was not properly available. Literacy rate was below 16%. Female literacy was around 7% only. Infant mortality rate was 218 per thousand. That means per thousand live births, 218 children used to die. Widespread poverty and lack of health facilities. Poverty was also high. Then you talk about occupational structure. So around 70 to 75% of workforce was engaged in agriculture. So India's population was heavily dependent on agriculture for their source of income. And manufacturing and services sector, they accounted 10% and 15-20% respectively. Manufacturing का रोल काफी कम था, services sector का रोल फिर भी ज्यादा था. And infrastructure, what was the state of infrastructure? So infrastructure में railway, ports, roads, they were developed. So certain good steps were also taken, like development of infrastructure, ports, railways. We got railways in 1850. They were developed, which helped India in better transportation, and commuting was easy. Railways were introduced in 1850, not 1950, 1850. Railways were introduced in 1850, and first railway was first train. It ran between Mumbai to Thane, and it facilitated British trade. Although their purpose was facilitating their own trade, quick transportation of their arms and ammunitions, but in longer term it benefited India because of good infrastructure development. So that was about chapter 1. India on the eve of independence. We have seen different segments. What was the status, like demographics, like infrastructure, etc. So this was about India. before independence. Then now we are talking about Indian economy after independence, that is between 1950 to 1990. After independence and before the 1991 reforms, what was the state of Indian economy? So you all know that India gained independence on 15th August 1947, almost 200 years after British colonial rule. And remember, India adopted mixed economy. What is mixed economy? We did not go for capitalism or socialism exclusively. We have adopted a mixture of them. That is mixed economy. Types of economic systems, if you see, there are three: capitalism, socialism, and mixed economy. Capitalism is market driven, where your factors of production, producing units, majorly they are held by the private entities. Socialist economy is where production related decisions and resources are primarily held and taken by your state or the authority or the government. Mixed economy has features of both. That means market also does its work and state also intervenes whenever is required. So mixed economy has features of both the kind of economic systems like capitalism and socialism. Then there were 5-year plans, right? So in 1950 only planning commission was constituted. 51 से we had the 5-year plans. 12 5-year plans हमने बनाए थे for development of Indian economy. What were the broad objectives of these 5-year plans? Growth, increasing the GDP, modernizing Indian economy in all segments, self-reliance, because imports पर dependence हमारा बहुत ज़्यादा था, right? So we wanted to have self-reliance in terms of food as well as other products. Equity, fair distribution of wealth and resources, because poverty and inequality were very high. So these were the 4 major goals of 5-year plans. Then if you look at the situation of agriculture between 1950 to 1919, there were certain land reforms which were adopted, like abolition of zamindari. So zamindari abolish hote hi the tenants became owners and lot of problems were solved, because zamindars, they used to exploit the tenants and the farmers. Land ceiling, limit on land ownership was also there, because otherwise only few number of farmers, they used to hold huge land, right? So there was concentration of ownership and lot of farmers were landless. So to reduce this kind of inequality, land ceiling was introduced, where you can have limited amount of ownership over the land. Then came in 1960s the green revolution. Green revolution क्या था? With the help of technology, with the help of high yielding variety seeds, we were able to produce lots of wheat, basically wheat and rice. तो primarily दो crops थी, wheat and rice. हमने agriculture में revolution लाया, and you know that Swaminathan, M.S. Swaminathan is known as the father of green revolution, right? So with the help of M.S. Swaminathan, we were able to expand the production of wheat and rice, which made India self-sufficient. Okay, so introduction of high yielding variety seeds, which increased production of particularly 2 crops, wheat and rice, and it was particularly concentrated in the states like Maharashtra and certain parts of UP. So it increased surplus production, so we exported also and we were self-sufficient in that case. Government also provided certain subsidies to improve or boost agriculture. Then industry and trade between 1950 and 1990. What was the status of industry and trade? Industrial Policy Resolution 1956. So this IPR 1956 was adopted, where with the help of which the government controlled the key industries like steel and mining. So exclusive to public sector, mixed PPP and private sector. So basically industries were classified into 3 categories: such industries which are exclusively held by the government, such industries which have a mixture, both the segments working over it, like private and public sector, and third one which is exclusively private sector, which got license from the government. So 3 industries were there. Particularly these were steel and mining and coal related industries. If we talk about small scale industries, so small scale industries were encouraged for the employment and rural development, because Small scale industries were crucial if we wanted to shift the workforce from agriculture. Tax benefits were provided, low interest pay loans were provided so that small scale industries can flourish and employment can be generated in the rural and semi-urban areas. Then trade policy, import substitution. Remember, they can ask you what is import substitution. So policies of import substitution were adopted. Import substitution kya hai? Where we want to find alternatives if we have high dependence on imports, because so basically domestically producing that good or service which we were importing otherwise, because when we import we have to pay out the foreign currency, right? So it is a leakage from the circular flow of money. Protection of domestic industries through tariffs and quotas. We wanted to protect the domestic industries from tariffs and quotas. Tariffs क्या होते हैं? जो भी टैक्स हम imported goods पे लगाते हैं. Quota क्या होता है? Quota is quantitative restriction, like how many, so it is quantitative, right? It is not related to price. How much volume of something can you import? So this used to be the quantitative restriction. It helped build India a self-reliant economy. Then achievements and failures during 1950 to 1990. जितने भी steps government ने लिए, broader steps like green revolution, like industrial policy resolution, IPR, all these, उनके क्या broad achievements and failures हैं, let's discuss. So achievements, if we talk about, first achievement of course is self-sufficiency in food grains. Green revolution particularly helped India in achieving self-sufficiency in food grains. Then diversified industrial base and growth in services sector. So these were the key achievements during this period. And what were the failures? Public sector inefficiencies. Although industries were majorly held by the government, but they were not efficient enough. And over-regulation or license Raj. Indian industries were suffering from license Raj. What is license Raj? License Raj basically means where you have to get lot of approvals from different departments and ministries. The next one is agricultural dependence remained high. Still, dependence for this, so as a source of income, the dependence on agriculture remained quite high. So these were certain failures between 1950 to 1919. Now we are moving on to the third chapter summary, which is LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization. 1991 के जो reforms थे इंडिया के, उसी का result है that Indian economy is in a good shape now, right? So it is one of the important contributors of Indian economy's good shape as of now. So third chapter of Indian economic development talks about liberalization, privatization and globalization. What is LPG? What were these reforms? So you see, in 1991, India faced severe economic crisis. हमारे पास सबसे पहले what we faced was crisis because we had huge debt, external debt. Government ने बाहर से पैसा बहुत लिया हुआ था. Also low foreign exchange reserves. Why? Because we were importing, we were heavily dependent on imports. तो जब we were heavily dependent on imports, we had very low foreign exchange reserves, right, which were only available for 2 weeks of imports, only sufficient for 2 weeks of imports, and inflation was very high. So these were the situations which called alarmingly for certain reforms, and India approached World Bank and IMF for a loan of $7 billion under these conditions. So you see, IMF ने loan तो approve किया, but then IMF had a condition. What was the condition? That we will approve your loan, but you will have to strategically and structurally reform your economy. There are certain structural deficiencies in your economy which needs to be corrected, because today we are providing you this $7 billion of loan, but tomorrow again and again you will not be dependent on loan, and how will you be repaying it, right? So you need to have reforms in your economic structure. So that called for these kind of reforms in 1991. So let's see what were the reforms. Particularly, two broad measures, two broad objectives of these reforms were there: stabilization measures and structural reforms. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल इमीडिएट मेजर्स क्या थे, where we wanted to stabilize the immediate worry some factors like high inflation, less forex reserves, right? तो इनको कैसे stabilize करना है? Long term में we adopted these structural reforms like LPG. So what is LPG? First is L stands for liberalization. Liberalization क्या है? Where you reduce lot of legislation and all. So Indian economy you see was suffering from license raj. Lot of permissions, approvals were required. So it was difficult for industries, factories to set up new units and expand, right? So here, industrial sector reforms में licensing was abolished. कुछ सेगमेंट्स थे जिनमें लाइसेंस लेना बहुत ज़रूरी है, तो उनमें रखा गया, लाइक अल्कोहल, टोबैको, एक्सप्लोजिव्स, एटॉमिक एनर्जी, है ना. तो इन सब के लिए तो, और एटॉमिक एनर्जी तो स्टेट के अंडर में ही आता है, वो प्राइवेट को नहीं दे सकते, राइट. सो दीज called for retaining of licenses, but then the most of the industries abolished the licensing. So government ने abolish कर दिया. Removal of entry barriers for private sector industries. Private sector was, so Indian economy was now open to private entities. Private sector came, they brought investment with themselves. उससे हमारा थोड़ा foreign reserves भी improve हुए, right? And then financial sector reforms if we talk, तो RBI का role was shifted from controller to facilitator. That RBI is not only regulator or controller of the banking system, it is also facilitator. That means it has to facilitate further banking penetration and financial development and financial market expansion. So these were the reasons. And then financial reforms के बाद if we talk about the tax reforms में they reduce the personal and corporate tax rates. Tax rates क्यों कम की? Because when you reduce these direct tax rates, it provides people with more of disposable income, और disposable income अच्छी होती है, so you know that people spend, और जब spending होगी तो demand create होगी, right? जीएसटी इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ था 2016 में हुआ था, राइट. अभी तो नहीं आया, बट उसकी बात तब भी हुई थी. इट सिंप्लीफाइड द टैक्स प्रोसीजर टू रिड्यूस इवेजन, ताकि लोग टैक्स चोरी ना करें. देन फॉरेन एक्सचेंज रिफॉर्म्स क्या थे? रुपी डीवैल्यू टू इम्प्रूव एक्सपोर्ट कॉम्पिटिटिवनेस. डीवैल्यूएशन क्या होता है और गवर्नमेंट क्यों जान करके अपनी करेंसी की वैल्यू को डीवैल्यू करती है? सी, डेप्रिसिएशन होता है जब मार्केट में अपने आप आपकी करेंसी की वैल्यू कम हो रही है, बट देन डीवैल्यूएशन होता है व्हेन द गवर्नमेंट, द अथॉरिटी deliberately devalues the value of your currency. Why? Because currency depreciation is good for export competitiveness. This is a good situation for export competitiveness. Now why is it good? Because जब आपकी currency devalued है, that means for example, suppose earlier you were able suppose earlier $1 was equals to say 70 rupees. Now $1 is equals to only 60 rupees. Sorry, $1 is equals to only 80 rupees, right? तो दोनों सिचुएशन को जब आप कंपेयर करेंगे, नाउ इफ यू लुक फ्रॉम एक्सपोर्टर साइड एंड द पर्सन, एक्सपोर्ट क्या है? कोई फॉरेन में बैठ के डिमांड कर रहा है, इसलिए यू आर एक्सपोर्टिंग, राइट? दैट पर्सन, समवन XYZ सिटिंग इन से US इज डिमांडिंग, दैट्स व्हाई वी आर एक्सपोर्टिंग. नाउ अर्लियर दैट पर्सन वाज एबल to purchase $1 is equals to 70 था, तो 70 rupees of worth of goods and services. Now currency has devalued, so say $1 is equals to 80 rupees. Now that person is able to buy with a dollar more worth rupees goods and services, like 80 rupees 80 worth of goods and services. So same amount में उनकी currency में you are able to buy more. That means their demand for our products will be more, so we will be exporting more. Simple logic. तो Indian economy में इसको devalue किया गया. Indian government devalued the rupee to improve the export competitiveness. Remember this point. Exchange rate जो है वो flexible कर दी गई. It was not fixed, and now you know that exchange rates are market driven. right? They are market driven. Then what were trade and investment reforms? Basically they removed import licensing, कुछ hazardous goods को छोड़ के import licensing जो है they reduced it and reduced tariffs and import quotas. जो भी tariffs और import quotas थे उनको भी reduce किया. Also removed export duties to boost export. So basically import और export पे जितने भी duties थी उन सबको reduce कर दिया so as to boost trade relations from India. This was about liberalization. Now let's talk about privatization. Privatization क्या है? When you open up your economies for private players to come and participate, right? So here this is to improve efficiency of the enterprises. See, government enterprises and private enterprises, if you compare, of course private sector is more efficient because they have this goal of profit maximization, right? Government का goal क्या है? Welfare of the public. Private sector, whenever it comes, it brings with itself the latest technology, efficiency, capital, foreign currency. अगर कोई multinational company आ रही है, right? So lot of benefits it has. So basically disinvestment was also done. Lot of public sector enterprises, उनका stake जो था उसमें government का जो share था, government ने उसको private entities को बेच दिया to boost up efficiency. And also government introduced different categories, Navratna, Miniratna, Maharatna. इनके basis पे the status basically indicated how much funding you can do without say any government approval. तो मिनी रत्ना महारत्ना कैटेगरीज में भी डिवाइड किया जाने लगा. नवरत्ना छोटा है, देन मिनी रत्ना, देन महारत्ना, राइट? जैसे इंडियन ऑयल कॉर्पोरेशन, ओएनजीसी, बीएसएनएल, ये सारे जो एंटरप्राइजेस दे वर क्लासिफाइड. देन दे केम द ग्लोबलाइजेशन. व्हाट वाज ग्लोबलाइजेशन? ग्लोबलाइजेशन क्या है? इंटरलिंकिंग ऑफ एन इकोनॉमी विद रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. पूरे वर्ल्ड के साथ योर इंटरलिंकिंग इज बेसिकली ग्लोबलाइजेशन. ग्लोबलाइजेशन से ट्रेड बैरियर रिड्यूस हुए, आउटसोर्सिंग इंप्रूव हुई. सो इंडिया में सर्विसेज सेक्टर में बूम आया. That is BPO, IT, call centers. Why? Because India has a lot of population, you know that. And that population is also well equipped or well fluent in English. Now what multinational companies require is, they require fluent English speakers at a cheap wage, right? So India में unemployment ज़्यादा होने की वजह से English भी बोलनी आती है, तो बहुत सारे call centers में Indians started working. And this called for expansion of services export. So हमारा services export यहाँ से surplus में होना चालू हुआ, right? And then role of WTO, World Trade Organization. India also became a member of WTO in 1995. और जैसे ही India इसका member बना, you know what WTO does is, WTO is an organization which wants free and fair trade. That trade should be free for everyone and fair for everyone. No one country should have certain comparative or absolute kind of advantages in trade relations. So India becoming member of WTO was also an important and significant development. The next one is impact of these economic reforms. So the LPG reforms we have talked about. What has been the impact? So if you look at the positive impact, it helped in rapidly increasing GDP from 5.6 to 8%. So Indian GDP increased very exponentially. Then increase in FDI. अब FDI ज़्यादा आया प्राइवेट प्लेयर्स के साथ आने से, तो we had swelling foreign exchange reserves, right? Foreign exchange reserves, they swelled, which was necessary. And then growth in services sector, you know, BOP, call centers की वजह से service sector में boom आया, as I have already told you. Then if we talk about negative impact, what was the negative impact? Yes, तो see, एग्रीकल्चर में पब्लिक इन्वेस्टमेंट कम हो गया, कंपटीशन बढ़ गया, तो जो वेल्दी फार्मर्स थे उनको बेनिफिट होने लगा क्योंकि टेक्नोलॉजी वो ही अफोर्ड कर सकते थे. स्मॉल और मार्जिनल फार्मर्स टेक्नोलॉजी अडॉप्ट नहीं कर सकते थे, तो इट इंक्रीज्ड इनइक्वालिटीज. सेकेंड, इंडस्ट्री में चीप इंपोर्ट्स. अच्छा, टैरिफ्स एंड कोटा रेस्ट्रिक्शंस ऑन इंपोर्ट्स फॉर आल्सो रिड्यूस। चीप इंपोर्ट होने से हमारे यहाँ का प्रोडक्शन वाज लेस कॉम्पिटिटिव। व्हाई? बिकॉज दे हैव गुड टेक्नोलॉजीज, दोज हु आर प्रोड्यूसिंग इट, एंड वी डिड नॉट हैव सो मच ऑफ स्टेट ऑफ द आर्ट ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी, बट देन वी वर importing, so they were cheaply available. Of course you will go and buy the cheap products, right? So it impacted negatively the domestically produced goods. Also lack of infrastructure and investment. Why? Because इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर में प्राइवेट कंपनीज आ गई, प्राइवेट कंपनी सिर्फ अपना प्रॉफिट देखती हैं, गवर्नमेंट हैज टू बूस्ट अप द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर। एम्प्लॉयमेंट ग्रोथ इन जीडीपी, इट ग्रू फ्रॉम 5.6 to 8% ऑलमोस्ट, बट एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेशन अभी भी कम था। लॉट ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट अपॉर्चुनिटीज, दे वर नॉट जनरेटेड अप टू द लेवल, अप टू द मार्क। देन पब्लिक सेक्टर में डिसइन्वेस्टमेंट जो है, उससे एसेट्स का अंडर वैल्यूएशन हुआ, बिकॉज गवर्नमेंट ने बहुत सारा डिसइन्वेस्टमेंट किया था, और इससे जो प्रॉफिट्स हुए वो बजट डेफिसिट्स में ही चला गया रादर देन इन्वेस्टमेंट। तो जो भी डिसइन्वेस्टमेंट करके गवर्नमेंट ने फंड रेज किया, all that fund got into, because external debt zyada tha, so repayment of loan, so that could have been utilized, you know, for productive purposes like capital creation and infrastructure development, but it did not happen. So these were certain negative impact. Now challenges and criticism. So what are the challenges ahead, and what have been the criticism of all these LPG reforms? So you see, globalization basically, ek to inequalities बढ़ गई, right? So it widened the gap between rich and poor. डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज ने ट्रेड बैरियर्स इंपोज कर दिए, तो हमारा प्रोडक्ट लेस कॉम्पिटिटिव हो गया। डिसइन्वेस्टमेंट, अंडर वैल्यू का डिसइन्वेस्टमेंट की वजह से लॉट ऑफ पब्लिक एसेट्स दे गॉट अंडर वैल्यूड। ऑल्सो growth was only concentrated in certain sectors, as you know, service sector, IT, telecom, जबकि agriculture, manufacturing, they were still suffering. So LPG reforms का जो impact था, positive impact, it was not well distributed, it was concentrated. Then, so this was chapter 3. Now we have chapter 4. Chapter 4 deals with human capital formation. What is human capital formation? Human capital formation क्या है? Human capital और development में क्या फ़र्क है? All these things will be talked about. This is again very important. So let's discuss this. All right. So first of all, what is this thing, right? You know, human capacity to store and transmit knowledge has helped human evolution. And what is human capital? So human capital is human as a resource. Capital क्या होता है? Which helps in, which is a resource for you, which helps in say production, etc. So human is also a capital, but that human, that person has to be educated. So if your population is educated, that is an asset for the economy, right? Human capital. Then sources of human capital, of course, as I told you, education. Education. Major source is education. Higher education leads to more human capital, right? Then health. Healthy workers. If workers are not healthy, they are not going to produce something. They are not going to help you in any production, right? Health. Then on the job training. On the job training is also important, because skill, uplifting the skill or upskilling is also important for your population to be an asset for the economy. Migration. Migration. See, migration क्या होता है? Movement of people for better opportunities, right? तो जहां पर भी ज्यादा सैलरी मिलती है, people tend to go there, right? Of course, this is human nature. So it also calls for migration. Migration से भी human capital affect होता है. In certain regions, you see migration is lot of migrated population is there because good job opportunities and good wage level. Then information, knowledge about job opportunities, etc. is also important in important decision making. That means if people are well aware of all the opportunities, they will be able to tap, right, the opportunity. But if they are not aware of the opportunities, then the human capital idea will be somewhat blur. Then the thing is, what is the difference between human capital and physical capital? See, human capital क्या है? Intangible. Human capital क्या है? You can touch the person, right? But you cannot touch the intellectual capacity of the person. So it is intangible. Physical capital क्या है? Which you can touch and feel कि ये physical capital है, machinery, assets. Then inseparable from the owner. You cannot separate the human capacity, mind's capacity, intellectual capacity from a person, right? But physical capital can be snatched away, it can be stolen, it can be separated. It creates both private and social benefits, but it only creates private benefits. Human capital क्या है? If your population is well behaved, well educated, तो social harmony भी होगी. So दोनों benefits हैं. But physical capital में सिर्फ private benefits हैं, because physical कैपिटल से सिर्फ इकोनॉमिक गेन्स होते हैं. इट कैन इम्प्रूव विद कॉन्टिन्यूस इन्वेस्टमेंट, बट इट डेप्रिशिएट्स विद टाइम. फिजिकल कैपिटल क्या है? आपने एक बार मशीनरी खरीदी, उसकी वैल्यू एक साल बाद कम ही होगी, बट ह्यूमन कैपिटल की वैल्यू कभी कम नहीं होती. विद टाइम इट इंक्रीजेस. सो दीज आर द बेसिक डिफरेंसेस. रिमेंबर, दिस इज इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन व्हिच हैज बीन आस्क्ड. सो व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन ह्यूमन कैपिटल एंड फिजिकल कैपिटल? Then how human capital is related to economic growth? So you see, education and health is human capital, right? Good, highly educated or good education of population and healthy population basically is an asset for the economy, because they will be working, and when they are working, they add to the income generation capacity of the economy. So education and health, it increases income generating capacity. Productivity अच्छी होगी, ability to adopt to new technologies, more innovation and inventions. Then human capital versus human development. What is the difference? See, firstly, human capital क्या है? Increasing in productivity through education and health. Human development focuses on improving overall well-being and life. Human development broader concept है. Human development talks about what? Human development talks about overall quality of life, education, health, life expectancy. Overall, the quality of life should be good. It is means to end, it is end in itself. See, human capital is a means to achieve human development. If you have educated, healthy population, you will achieve human development, but the end itself is human development. Then investment in education and health is justified only if it increases productivity, but here investment is justified even without productivity increases. So even you are not productive, but you are healthy in all dimensions, that is human development. Now if we talk about the state of human capital formation in India, तो compare अगर हम करें, एडुकेशन पे जो एक्सपेंडिचर है गवर्नमेंट का एज परसेंटेज ऑफ टोटल गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर हैज इंक्रीज, दैट्स वाई ओवर टाइम. 1952 में आप देखो 7.92% था और 14 में 15.7. अभी 1952 में एजुकेशन एक्सपेंडिचर एज परसेंटेज ऑफ जीडीपी इफ यू सी वाज ओनली 0.64%, बट नाउ 2014 तक इट वाज 4.13%. दैट मीन्स दैट कॉन्स्टेंटली गवर्नमेंट इज ऑल्सो एक्सपैंडिंग इट्स एक्सपेंडिचर, right, in education, because it is important. And elementary education जो है, primary education, that has got maximum spending from the government, because primary education foundation level is important. Indicators अगर आप देखें literacy rate के, they have also improved over time. Like adult literacy rate 1990 में 61.9 थी, 17-18 में 82%. Then female की अगर हम बात करें 37.9 in 1990, but then 2017-18 में 66%, right? So these literacy rates figures, they show that it has improved over time. Higher education का scenario क्या था? Higher education में Indian economy जो है वो steep है, that means few people reach at higher education. Steep से क्या मतलब है? Base क्या है हमारा? Primary education, right? Then secondary and then higher education. तो higher education जो है बहुत steep है. Not lot of people can afford higher education. So unemployment rate जो थी youth में वो बहुत ज़्यादा थी. You see 19% for rural male and 30% for rural female graduates. Only less of people could reach there, और उसके बाद quality भी अच्छी नहीं थी. Lot of people they dropped out because they could not afford. So these were certain challenges. Then government's role in education and health. What has been the government's role in overall education and health, and how did government has improved this situation. So government intervention necessary raha hai because government का ही मोटिव है पब्लिक वेलफेयर. Government can invest long term on education and health. So which are the organizations which are working towards education and health? These are your NCERT जिसकी टेक्स्ट बुक्स आपका बेसिक सोर्स है. NCERT, UGC जो हायर एजुकेशन को संभालता है, यूनिवर्सिटी ग्रांट्स कमीशन. AICTE, ऑल इंडिया काउंसिल फॉर टेक्निकल एजुकेशन विच प्रमोट्स टेक्निकल एजुकेशन. ICMR, इंडियन काउंसिल ऑफ मेडिकल रिसर्च which oversee and regulates the medical research segment. Then what are the challenges in human capital formation? अभी भी इंडिया में human capital formation में क्या क्या challenges हैं? Low spending on education. अभी भी हमें एजुकेशन में स्पेंडिंग बढ़ानी है. रीजनल डिस्पैरिटीज, यू सी देयर आर सर्टेन स्टेट्स व्हिच आर स्पेंडिंग वेरी लेस ऑन एजुकेशन एज कंपेयर टू अदर्स. सदर्न स्टेट्स आर परफॉर्मिंग वेल, बट नदर्न इंडिया में देयर आर सर्टेन स्टेट्स लाइक हिमाचल, हरियाणा, दे हैव टू, बिहार, they have to improve their spending on education. Gender inequality is still an issue. Gender inequality, although female literacy has improved, but female literacy is still lower than the male literacy levels. So that has to improve. High unemployment. High unemployment is also one of the challenges. The next is future prospects. Education for all. Then need to increase spending. Then gender equity we need to ensure, and knowledge based economy. Knowledge based economy के लिए हमारे पास steps हैं जैसे national education policy. तो हमारा जो spending का target है education पे, it is 6% of GDP, right? At least 6% of GDP का target जो है वो sustained रहे, then it would be transforming the education arena. Then next chapter is rural development. Rural development अगला chapter है. 4 chapters we have covered. 4 chapters are only left. Next one is rural development. I will be taking up this chapter in the next part. Next part में we would complete all these discussions with some sample questions, right? So theory है, we cannot discuss the answers in much detail, but at least some of the questions, sample questions will be there to give you hint what kind of questions will be there tomorrow in the examination, right? So 4 chapters are done. I will be taking up part 2 in second half today itself. Stay tuned. Thank you so much. Have a great day. See you in the next session.